Assalamu alaikum and Ramadan Mubarak. Welcome to another episode of the Science of Soul podcast. This episode is a really special one and one that we both really enjoyed putting together for you. It is for Ramadan. The beautiful month of Ramadan is upon us, and we decided to do an episode where we talk about some tips to make the most of this month. Obviously, everyone is maybe a little bit down because they can't be going to the masjid, or they are not with friends and family and loved ones because of this horrible COVID-19 crisis. But we can still make the most of it. There's a lot of good that this situation has brought to light, and we can still make the most of this Ramadan and make it potentially the best one yet. So enjoy, share with your loved ones and your friends and your family, and yeah, rate us on Apple Podcasts, on Google Podcasts, subscribe on YouTube, and yeah, comment if you enjoy it, and if you've got any tips yourself. All right, assalamu alaikum.
How
All
are
right,
you doing?
I'm good, bro. Alhamdulillah. How's things?
Yeah, good man. This is my new abode for the time being. I don't know how it's
Spartan,
going to
bro.
last.
It looks Spartan.
Does
It's so
with a
bare.
really comfortable bed. A really comfortable bed.
So this is where the NHS has put you to live for the next foreseeable future of
Oh, well,
COVID-19.
yeah. I don't know. I don't know how long it's going to last. Yeah.
How's it been like for you?
Oh, I am so lonely. Uh, I am so lonely.
So it's for you, it's proper lockdown. Like it's not like, for a lot of people they're with family and they're with friends and they're chilling, but for you, you're isolated.
Yeah, I'm isolated.
So do you want to just tell
Obviously,
us? Do you want
it's
to just tell us
for
why? Like what the reason is, just so it makes sense.
um, so because of my mum, as being a healthcare professional, I am at higher risk of spreading it to my mum, innit, bruv?
Hmm.
So she's like over 60. She has underlying conditions, which kind of put her at a a worse risk of developing complications.
Yeah.
COVID. So yeah, I've been given this. This is sick. It's like £80 a week, not a week actually, a day. So the NHS are paying quite a lot
Yeah.
for this.
When
But
you first told me that, I thought that's amazing, because that shows that they're willing to invest in their people to look after them, because they took your family's like health into consideration. They thought, we need you, but we don't want to endanger your family, so we'll put you up somewhere.
yeah, it wasn't. I mean, I asked for it. It's a service that they were providing. I did ask for it. They didn't come asking, oh, are you okay or anything like that. But yeah, it's a nice thing.
Okay. Well, yeah, it's a nice thing. Be grateful, bruv. Come on.
Yeah, no.
I was just joking. So yeah, I wanted to talk.
Well, it feels like I'm in prison, and you're doing a documentary. Now I'm going to tell you
Are you the, are
how
you
I
the,
didn't.
are you the Tiger King?
How
No,
I
you're you're
didn't kill.
you're you're lion face.
I didn't kill those lions. Okay, I didn't kill those lions.
You finished
They've
that
got the
documentary.
wrong person locked up. Wrong person locked up here.
I actually gave up on that. I watched the first episode and I thought, wow, this is crazy. Let's see where it goes. And then I watched the second episode and I just decided, you know what? These people, I just I can't. It's too much. So obviously, if anyone's listening to this and they don't know what the Tiger King is, it's a documentary on Netflix about people in America who are involved in the rearing and breeding of tigers and other big cats, and some. I'm sure you've seen the whole thing, right? Some crazy stuff happens in it.
Oh my god, it's mad. It's crazy. He gets a. No, I don't want to dread it for anyone.
Yeah, yeah. Spoiler
Actually,
alert. Spoiler alert. If you haven't seen it, Abdin's about to give something away.
Oh, you have to see that bit though. You have to at least see the bit that I was talking about. It's
I've seen the
hilarious.
bit in the second episode where a certain staff member is hurt,
Oh no, 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 not that one.
That was that. I thought that was horrific.
That was horrific. Yeah.
She seemed so calm about the whole thing. You know, when she was
She
lying there,
didn't. Yeah, and she didn't even have an arm. Her arm was ripped off, bro. Well,
and
not
I was
ripped off,
like,
but
and she was just calm, lying there, breathing steadily, and they were saying, "Yeah, yeah, you okay?" And she's like, "Yep, yep, I'm fine." I'm like,
that's shock.
that's severe shock.
That's that's shock, bro.
That's crazy shock. So, anyways, this conversation, I was thinking it would be cool if we, like, Ramadan is here, and I thought it would be wicked to talk about some things that we could share with each other, tips that would help us make the most of this year. Because obviously, with what's happening in the world, everyone knows with the coronavirus, there's a number of things that have made Ramadan seem a little bit different. You know, the
Mm,
atmosphere with the lockdown and not being able to go to the masjid. So, when I told you about that, you seemed up for that.
mm.
Um, and I guess like we both need it. I mean, you need it especially because your circumstances are kind of just looking at you, they're extreme.
Does it look like it's just a floating face, bro? Look, everything look
You
floating
actually,
face,
you,
just blended into the chair.
for
All you
those
can see
people
is
who are listening to the audio, Abdin's not in the studio. He's skyping in from the home that he's been placed in by the NHS, and he actually looks like, well,
Do I
now
look
with
like a kite now? Look, with the string
you
and
look
everything.
like
This is what
you
kites will do in there.
you look like you called me from a maximum security penitentiary. So I think, yeah, for you especially, but for me too, it would be good to talk about some stuff that would help us make the most of Ramadan. Um,
Yeah, I think you know when people go to prison,
yeah,
they change her. So this is
for the better.
for the better. So I don't know. This might be the year, bruv. This might be the month that changes me.
What if you come out of this as like
Worse,
a militant Black Power movement? You know, like a
institutionalized guy
like
that can't survive in the
you
real
no,
world.
you could come out as like a Black Panther or something, like you know, uh,
I just shout freedom. I don't know for who, but just everyone. Freedom.
Abdin X. Like you read the whole dictionary from beginning to end.
I'm alive, but I've like managed to make a documentary. Who killed Abdin X?
It was Abdin.
So what are your plans for this month?
So I already did this, but this is one thing I wanted to talk about. I hope this doesn't come off as self-righteous and stuff, but it
You self-righteous.
it
Beep.
it is actually, I think, a really good tip. And the reason why I think it's so good is because I heard it first, and when I first heard it, this is years ago, I was like, that doesn't sound that amazing, like it could be life-changing. But honestly, this tip has been life-changing for me. And you're
Mm,
gonna be like, oh my God, what is it? Writing things down. How lame does that sound? So what I mean by that is set some goals. Like, okay, I want to do this in Ramadan, and I want to do this in Ramadan. Um, Obviously, so intention is first, and then you look at your intentions, and then you write them down in a
yeah.
notebook. Like, I want to read this much of the Quran, and I want to do this much exercise, and I want to make sure I do this much dhikr, or whatever.
Mm, mm,
But obviously, all of us have those intentions and have those plans. But when you write it down, and what you do is you write it down every day, like, and you check back on it. When you write it down, it kind of makes you accountable to yourself, and it's like you've distilled your thoughts, and it's not like an airy fairy dream that you have. It's now like a solid thing that you're going to work towards. So,
mm.
um,
So
like
how does it work? Do you kind of write it down before you go to sleep for the next day, a plan for the next day, and then you look? How do you do it?
that's actually a really good way of doing it. So my suggestion was gonna be that you write it for the month. So just say
Okay.
like Ramadan's
Okay.
about to start, and then you say, okay, this Ramadan I want to achieve this, this, and this.
Okay. Yep. Yep.
Um, but what you said is actually a fantastic evolution of that, because then when you write it down each night, you can almost review what you did that day. Like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I wanted to read a juz of the Quran. Did I read it? No, I didn't. But tomorrow I will read one and a half, and then that way you kind of it just helps you keep things in focus, and
Mm,
you don't get distracted by
mm,
other things. Essentially it's a to-do list.
mm, mm.
And then when you work through that to-do list, you realize that you're making the most of your time, and you're
Mm.
not yeah, you're not wasting it. And Ramadan is like a time that absolutely shouldn't be wasted, I reckon.
Yeah, yeah. It's
Um,
interesting that you said you're talking about lists. Is something that when I was brushing my teeth and I was like, what am I gonna talk about? You know, I'm such a
yeah,
flawed person. There's so much things that I need to do and fix up.
yeah,
And I thought, okay, you know what, my bad habits. And I got many flaws and many bad habits. And one of them, you know, I'm gonna say is my short fuse. And I was like, oh,
yeah,
I need to kind of write this down to just reinforce the fact that I'm doing that because you know, it's quite easy to forget things. Um, so yeah, I think that's I might actually give that a go. You know that I might actually really think about what I want to change and what habits I want to you know, bring about within my life. But you know, to be like this is, I guess this is maybe this is a confession, but I feel like my past the previous Ramadans that have, you know, gone by, they haven't been. You know, I had a benchmark of a really good Ramadan that had, you know, the year that we went to Jerusalem.
yeah. I remember that.
That was a very good. I mean, I think I've probably had a better Ramadan than that, but that was a very good, productive. I managed to read the whole Quran that year, and you know, I remember that I was quite militant about reading the Quran and, you know, doing at least one juz per day. Um, so that was kind of a benchmark, and the Ramadans that have come after that they haven't lived up to that benchmark.
Yeah,
And every Ramadan that had come after that, it was like, okay, you know, my last Ramadan didn't go so well. I want to make this Ramadan better. And you know, it will start off quite well, and then I will just fizzle out. I'll just get tired, etc. Um, so I think for me it is very complicated. It is very confusing. You know, what should you achieve from Ramadan? And I think that is the question that I was asking myself. Um, and it comes from my whole year. You know, what is lacking in my whole year? And there's so many things that lacking in my whole year, but you know, what is the kind of the umbrella thing that is probably causing all these problems? And I personally think it's my connection with God.
okay.
I feel like it's not as strong as it could be. Obviously, our connections with God is, you know, goes up and down. It's varied, and but I would like my connection with God to be stronger.
Yeah,
Um, and I think this is probably a really good time to develop that, nurture that. You know, in a time for me, I mean, Ramadan. What does it? It's a great time, and there's so many different benefits. But I feel like, um, you know, preventing yourself from eating, drinking, and carrying out these very primitive and instinctual impulses is for God is a good way of kind of showing yourself and telling yourself how convicted you know the conviction you have for God.
yeah,
Does that make sense? Because you know you may have that conviction, but it may not necessarily manifest itself into your behavior. It kind of
yeah,
becomes dampened down, or you know piled on top of you know piled on with kind of the the dirt and you know the confusion of this world, if that makes sense.
yeah,
So for me, I think that is important. I want to, at the end of it, obviously, I have to kind of, you know, what you said, come up with a system where I can, at the end of it, you know, I can achieve my goal of being more connected, consciously more connected with God, behaviorally more connected with God.
yeah.
Um,
I think it's interesting that you talk about that because the 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 fact of fasting is that people can't see it, right?
mm,
Like
mm,
it's not like, for example, growing a beard or wearing like very simple plain clothes where you're outwardly showing people, look how spiritual and pious I am.
mm,
Fasting is something which is very, very private in that
mm,
only you would know that you're fasting, you know,
mm,
because when you go out and about, people wouldn't know that you're fasting unless you
mm,
tell them. So that in itself is something which just from the sort of the mechanics of fasting and the realities of fasting, it is something that is just between you and Allah. And so already just the most basic element of fasting, which is to abstain from those primitive basic impulses you said, you're already like already that is a step towards Allah because it's completely private. Do you know what I mean?
mm,
It's
mm,
amazing. You know you're doing something which is going to strengthen that.
mm,
And I think sometimes, for me especially, like it's so easy to forget that the like abstinence of food and the other things that we stay away from is actually for Allah, and it's not some kind of means to lose weight or
mm, mm.
it's not something that you like try and just pass the time until it's time to like one thing I do that is so bad, man. I'm sure there's loads of other people do it, and if you do, then like if you're watching this on YouTube, then comment. Um, I watch food videos.
I watched so much food. Oh my God.
I watch so many food videos, and I'm literally like, yes, I'm gonna eat this tonight. You know,
It's so bad, bro, because sometimes I remember I used to watch MasterChef. Oh, that was so good during while you
during
fast.
Ramadan.
And, obviously they would cook pork. And, my mouth.
Haram, bro.
It's haram, man. I mean, it was conflicting. It was conflicted, man. Sometimes I'm like, okay, well, you know what? I can't watch this because there's only 1 hour before iftar or something like that. I can't. And other times I look at it and I'm just still, the salivating, like, oh, it's so
Uh,
bad. Um, but yeah. But is that a bad thing? Watching food programs and if you have the right mindset, if
what is the right mindset of watching food
I
programs
don't know, it's like,
when you're
oh,
fasting?
thank you, or watching it, it's like, oh, thank you, God, for giving us food, giving
That's
me
actually
food.
yeah, that's true. You know, it's amazing how yeah you can turn that into like a lesson of gratitude. That's true. I mean, for me, it just honestly used to be a way of distracting my primitive brain into thinking that it's getting food.
Yeah, yeah,
Do you know what I mean? Like it's like yes, you're getting because you know the pleasure of food is not just the eating of it and the taste of it, it's also the sight of it.
yeah, yeah,
You know
yeah,
what I mean? And so on some level the brain must be like registering the visuals
yeah,
and
yeah.
telling the body, yes, you're being satiated. You know, keep watching.
Well, I mean, there is that thing that you need to, if that go and sit next to your food, right? So, you know, I don't know, maybe this we can't sit next to food for hours, can we? So,
No.
you know,
But you
but
know what though? Have you noticed how when you eat at iftar time, the stuff that you eat might not be stuff that you normally would choose to eat the rest of the year, but
yeah,
at
yeah.
iftar time it just tastes amazing.
It tastes so good.
Yeah.
It does taste so good. Same with food programs, bro. I don't actually, you know what? I do watch a lot of food programs, but recently, I think this year I've been watching a lot of food programs. But before, it'll just be a Ramadan thing that I'm
Okay.
just watching it. I'm just watching food programs during Ramadan, and then afterwards, it's like, oh, I don't want to watch this. This is boring.
Oh, so okay, that's actually a good a good thing to mention to people that to make the most of this Ramadan is like appreciate what we're eating, and I suppose it couldn't hurt to watch some food programs and make some more interesting stuff at home.
So we're basically telling people to watch food programs. we are
Uh,
we are so bad at this, bro. I
yeah,
think the
that's a
only
bad one.
I think the
That's
only productive thing that has come out from this conversation so far is your list making thing.
yeah, that's and how long have we've been talking for about 20 minutes?
Ready?
Okay, no, there is other stuff that I have thought about, and I thought, okay, this could be a good one.
Mm,
So. You know, right now with the lockdown, the government said go out for your like once a day exercise and get some movement and stuff. So one of the things I've been doing is, I mean, I do this anyway. It's just like go out for a walk.
Mm,
Sometimes I go for a jog, but in Ramadan I might not go for a jog. But when I go for my walk, I normally got headphones and I listen to a podcast.
okay.
So I would say maybe a good tip to make the most of this Ramadan whilst you're doing your exercise anyway is you could listen to a sheikh giving a lesson or a lecture,
Mm,
or you could listen to there's actually really, really good Islamic podcasts out there. Like I know ours is kind of we're just like having fun a lot of the time, but there's I'll recommend some. There's one which is called the Islamic History Podcast. I love that podcast. The brother who does that, he's from America, and it's really informative, and you get like this really visual, rich sense of our past, our
mm,
and things to be proud of, and things to know a little bit more about. So that could be like if you go for a walk, listen to the Islamic History Podcast. And then there's another one called Halal Tube, and
mm,
that one they just put up like khutbas and talks by sheikhs that have been given in the last couple of days.
mm,
So that's a really good one as well. So Islamic History Podcasts and Halal Tube, those are
mm,
really, really good. Like my suggestions.
mm. I think that's pretty good, bruv. Just
Yeah.
watch out. I mean, listen to our podcasts.
Oh, definitely listen to our podcast. We're gonna be making loads.
Inshallah. Oh yeah, we could do that, couldn't we? Make loads of
Yeah.
podcasts in Ramadan. Um, but my one's. I feel like the way I'm going is more. It's not as tangible as the advice that you're given. Well, I'm not saying that
You're
I'm
giving
giving
like
advice,
deep
but I think
spiritual stuff, I think.
I think it's more for myself, like the things that I want to develop. And
Yeah.
I think so. What I found, I did go through obviously how do I now connect with God, you know,
Yeah.
and there's I think two basic things um, really stand out for me, and that is praying and Quran.
Yep.
This is the month of the Quran. So in terms of praying, I mean, we all pray, don't we? We all pray, but how connected are we when we are praying?
Yeah.
Uh, you know, uh, a lot of the times, we have to make sure that we're kind of completely distracted by the way we are praying. Are we praying the right way? Are we clean, etc., etc., which are very important things. They are very important. And obviously we have to look at prayer in a holistic way, looking at every single aspect of it. But sometimes we kind of forget the true nature of praying. Why do we pray? And I guess that is being connected with God. And what I'm getting at is basically the concentration that you have while you are praying. And I'm not going to say that it's easy. It's very difficult. It takes so. I wouldn't say that I can concentrate in salah. I can't concentrate in salah. My mind, it floats. It goes to so many different places. So I remember meditation. So it was just I used Headspace. You recommended Headspace for me, and I was just using their free 10 session meditation. And
Hmm.
I had meditated for only a few days,
Yeah.
1 or 2 or 3 days, and the way they do it is they or he takes you through so many different. Just doesn't It doesn't just get you to concentrate on your breathing, for example, and for
Yeah.
hours you just the function of taking you from concentrating on the noises around you to your breathing to then your body. I think that is amazing because it helps you to focus.
Hmm.
It helps you with the action of focusing, and I
Yeah.
think that was very important, and that is very important actually. So I was kind of using the same, well, not using, maybe I had developed very quickly this skill of focusing.
Yeah.
So what was happening in my prayer is that I will be able to focus on different things. So sometimes I was just listening. I was kind of doing the thing that I was doing, things that I was doing in meditation. And you know what? It was, although some people be like, maybe, I questioned, well, is that me concentrating on Allah or anything like that? But what it done for me is it stopped me from deviating.
Yeah.
So sometimes I would stand there and I would just listen to I'll be in a silent room, but I'll just listen to the sounds around me,
Mm.
and feel my presence within that sound, if
Yeah.
that makes sense. And in
Yeah.
doing so, it enabled me to understand what I'm doing, or feel what I'm doing, mainly not understand. Actually, I wasn't really thinking. It's really difficult to actually start thinking at those same times, as
Yeah.
well. um so in feel what I'm doing, and in doing so it just felt like that connection towards what you're doing, you're praying to God and etc. It's very difficult, like, and then when you start, you can go and start visualizing things, but it becomes very, very muddy and it becomes very complicated for me.
Yeah.
And then I would change that, if my mind start deviating away from that, I will go to something else, for example, just imagining the night sky. And that, for me, for different people, it'll probably be different things. But for me, the night sky was kind of elevating me through. It felt like I was just, you know, going through the night sky kind of thing, reaching God or
Yeah.
something like that. But that gave me some sort of peace, some sort of clarity. So I definitely recommend that. Well, it worked for me. I don't know if it will work for other
I,
people, but
I
it
think
definitely
I
worked.
think I think that's a wicked recommendation, and I'll say when you talk about it kind of like helping you train the 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 faculty of focusing,
Mm,
that's such a good way of putting it because focusing is like this action that we do.
mm.
It's not like some like mystical quality
Yeah, and
focus.
it.
It's
I
an
don't think
action.
it.
Like it's a
Yeah,
thing
yeah,
you have to
yeah.
practice it, and you get
It's not
better at it.
natural, is it? It's not natural.
Yeah, it's really, really not natural in today's society, I think. I
Mm,
think for like, for Eastern societies and civilizations, because they didn't have so many distractions and screens and like police sirens and things, I
yeah,
think,
yeah.
the idea of focusing, or sorry, the action of focusing was, I'm not gonna say easier, but it was much probably much more part of their daily life.
Mm, mm,
Like there's that amazing, I think you know this story better than I do, but there's that amazing story of the Sahaba
yeah.
who he was so focused in prayer.
I
Can
can.
you just can you tell it? Can you just tell it? Like,
No, no, go on. You tell it. I just from your face, I know what you're going to talk about. Go on, say it.
okay, so there's a Sahaba who was basically he'd been hit by an arrow,
Mm,
and so to remove it in his just normal state would have proved too painful for him. So he suggested that when he starts praying,
mm.
that when he's in that state of prayer and in that state of khushu and focus, then for his companions to pull it out. And so that's what he did. And it's just it's in that's an insane level of focus that he had in his prayer.
It's
But it's the same thing, right? It's that ability to make yourself so present with your prayer
mm,
that everything else is just kind of falls away.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
I think,
and
sorry, I was just going to say, I
yeah.
also think that recommendation that you've given of sort of implementing a bit of meditation in your life is a wicked one because of what's going on now. I feel like it'll also help with, say, anxiety or
Mm, mm,
potentially just that cabin fever that you get from being in lockdown for so long or not, doing the things that you want to do and makes you happy.
mm.
This kind of just keeps your mind a little bit fresh and healthy.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I mean, it's not just. It's weird, isn't it? It must be there must be something going on. Just calming your erratic brain down, your erratic mind down. Um, it does something to you. It washes away whatever it washes away. It washes something away, which makes you feel better.
Yeah,
And I've noticed that, and I'm not going to say that I'm I've been meditating for a very long time. I haven't.
yeah,
I'm one of those meditators that only meditate and then stop, meditate, stop.
yeah,
And I've noticed, for me to have noticed some difference in my life through meditation, I think is a big deal because I was never the type of person that who will meditate, and I would want to bring more consistency in that into my life with that. Um, so yeah, I definitely, and for me the other thing was actually is, why should I meditate if I'm going to pray?
hmm,
Should I be meditating if I'm praying? I think the meditation adds to a prayer.
yeah,
Um, because with prayer, it's it's
It's a complementary thing,
it's
isn't it?
yeah. I think you need, for me, I need that meditation so that I can implement the things that I learn in well, the things that I practice in meditation in my prayer. Whereas it's slightly it's difficult for you to practice that in prayer, where
Yeah,
it's the prayer is defined. There is set things in prayer that you have to do.
yeah.
Um,
I think
where
my analogy would be like, say for example, and this is not to put down anyone who has any kind of physical impairments that makes all the physical actions of prayer difficult. But if you're a healthy person who works out at the gym, does
mm,
stretches,
mm,
is physically mobile,
mm,
then like you said, the well-defined aspects of the motions of prayer will
mm,
be easier, as
yeah,
opposed to
yeah,
someone who's, say, fat and unhealthy. They won't be able to do ruku and sujud like
yeah,
how they should do. So
yeah,
in the same way, in the way that you exercise your body so that your physical acts of prayer can be much more refined and elegant, in the
mm,
same way, you exercise your mind so
mm,
that your consciousness can be much more refined and elegant
mm, mm.
in the prayer, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah, that does make sense. That's a good
Um,
analogy.
yeah, that's a wicked suggestion, man. I think that's good on so many levels, especially given the climate as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
As this, the second one is the Quran. And I keep telling you about this. Noman Ali Khan, his tafsir is
Yes.
brilliant. You don't even need to study it. Just listen to it.
Yeah.
Um, so that it helps you understand what the Quran is about, what it's talking about, the intricacy of the Quran, the beauty of the Quran. Because we majority of us, we have one kind of dimension of the Quran, the sound of the Quran, which is beautiful, the recitation of the Quran, and ourselves, we when we're reciting the Quran, how it makes us feel. But a lot of us, we don't have the other dimension of the Quran, and that is looking at its translation. And then when you have a sheikh like Noman Ali Khan, who has, he's not just gonna just translate the Quran for you, but he's gonna go through the intricacies of the Quran, sometimes talking about certain, why has Allah said this word, why couldn't he use a different word, and then explains why Allah has used that word. I think it brings out 10 more dimensions of the Quran.
Yeah.
And if his it's on YouTube, I believe it's on YouTube, so it's very easy
Yeah.
to find. um, so I highly recommend just listening to his tafsir. If you don't have time to sit down and study his tafsir, just listening to it, I'm sure it will make a difference, or it will yeah, it will definitely make a difference in people's lives. It will, that is what I intend to do. I want to do that. And then obviously recitation of the Quran, whether you understand it, if I'm still thinking, the important thing is the recitation or listening of the Quran. So I think in terms of uh, experience in the Quran, I want to experience the Quran in different ways: listening, reciting, looking at the Quran, touching the Quran, and then understanding the Quran, kind of absorbing it through all the faculties of my consciousness, if and taking the essence of the Quran in, because I believe that the Quran isn't just a thing that will have an impact on you consciously. It won't just have an impact on you through the things that you learn from it, and then you regulate your life from the things that you learn from it. But it must have some sort of, I mean, it will have some sort of impact on your ruh, your unconscious being,
Yeah.
which essentially is your spirit. And your spirit, when we think about the fitra, etc., etc., it will respond to it. It will
Yeah.
respond to the words of God.
Yeah.
We are in this perpetual kind of struggle for the fitra kind to, or the spirit to rejoin, go back to the true essence that it had. That it understands that the God is the creator. God is its creator. And in this world, how do we do that? I think that one of the easiest way to do that is feed it God's words,
Yeah.
um, through recitation, and even listening. And then obviously the conscious part of it, is, which will have a obviously unconscious impact, is understanding the Quran.
Yeah.
And I strongly recommend Numan Ali Khan's tafsir, is because when I was listening to it, I was just like, whoa, 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 you
It just
know?
blows your mind.
It blows you, it completely blows your mind. It
Yeah.
proper blows your mind. And then obviously, he is an expert in that field. And
Yeah.
there are, you can go beyond. Yeah, he talks about so many different scholars that you can go and, to further your knowledge and your understanding of the Quran, you can go and search these scholars up. But I think he's enough. I think he's
No,
enough
he's
for
yeah, he's
my
awesome.
level. He's enough.
No, but that's the thing. You say my level, but he's awesome because so like there's sheikhs like Sheikh Abdul Hakim Murad, who I
Yeah.
love listening to him, and he'll talk about very lofty and complicated ideas. Very cerebral person he is. But Nouman Ali Khan, Sheikh Nouman Ali Khan could talk about the same like ideas of the same complexity, but
Mm,
he'll just say it in a way which is really accessible, and
mm,
he'll put it into like context, and he'll give little stories of when he was growing up, and
mm,
like, or he'll give a story that is relevant to the time of the Prophet ﷺ,
mm,
and then that's why it blows your mind because you're
mm,
getting
mm,
these really complicated points,
mm, mm.
but you're just getting it, and
Yeah,
then in
yeah.
your brain something's just exploding because it's just so awesome.
And yeah, and the feelings that he invokes within you. I think we have become. I mean, it's good. Human beings. We have. Well, Muslims. Well, me. I think
Yeah.
I have become more of a person of. Oh, I need to do things. I need to remember things. I completely neglected the emotional part of me.
Mm.
And to be honest, we do believe in God through our emotions,
Yeah.
predominantly through our emotions, right?
Hmm.
And we through our feelings, and that is when you listen. For example, when you listen, or okay, I mean, yeah, when you listen to Quran. When I listen to certain surahs of the Quran, the other day I was listening to Saad Normani, and he has a beautiful recitation of Surah Nuh and Surah Maryam, which you you can find it on YouTube. It's very nice. But I was listening to Surah Nuh, and I couldn't. I was the translation was on there. Um, I know how to recite it. When I recite it, it makes me feel a certain way. When I read the translation, it makes me feel a certain way. But when I was listening to his recitation, you know what? The feelings that I was getting,
Yeah.
the kind of, it felt like whatever I have in here is breaking because of it just invoked this uncontrollable love connection. I don't know what it was, but at that moment, everything became irrelevant in this world.
Mm.
I'm trying to explain it, but trying to think back to it and explain it, which is quite difficult. But everything became quite irrelevant, and I don't mean in a destructive way,
Yeah.
but in a way that it enabled me to maybe this was I was connecting to Allah through the Quran.
Mm.
And I think those and then listening to Nouman Ali Khan, some of the things that he would say, the translation for me, for example, when I had read the translation of Surah Nas and Surah Falaq, right, and then I listened to his translations, and I wasn't writing it down. I wasn't like I need to remember this or etc. etc. But the feelings that came about from listening to that was on a different level, man. It was
Yeah.
completely different level, and I feel like that is what I've forgotten. That maybe that is the thing. I remember some of the good Ramadans that I've had. I remember one of the Ramadans that we would come out and we'd just look into the sky. Taraweeh, we would look into the sky and it would just be like it'll just make you feel something. You know.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think feeling is very important, and that is what I want to bring about. There's a lot of things over the years intellectually I have learned,
Yeah.
and they're all good things, but they have never. I'm going to be really honest. They have never helped me in the way that some of the simplest things have helped me. Like looking up into the sky and just looking at the majesty of the creation of God and just be marveled by it. You
Mm.
know, for me, I would say, and this, I don't know if this is right or wrong, but I would like to say that when I do that, those feelings have brought me closer to God than the rules or regulations that I've learned in Islam, or what this Imam said or that Imam said, which is very important. Is very important.
Yeah.
But yeah, I want to go back to that feeling my way through this world and going
Yeah.
to God, obviously with the direction of what I've learned.
No, that's honestly that's such a such a good point, man, because sometimes when scientists look at human beings and they try and figure out like why we have certain traits and why we do the things we do, emotions like almost get sidelined as this thing which is part of a brain which is older and more primitive and not as necessary. Like these days, people, sorry, scientists, will talk about the amazingness of like the cortex, like
Mm,
the
mm,
the frontal area of the brain, which is all to do with logic and figuring things out and stuff like that. Whereas like the parts that are to do with um how we can feel, like emotions,
mm,
they're so important because they help us make decisions, they help us go towards things that make us feel safe. And
mm.
I think you're right. So I would say, shall we distill what you said to a tip which we used to do when we were young,
Yeah.
is whenever you have a clear night this Ramadan, go outside and look up at the sky,
Mm,
like, because that is a way to reconnect with the creator in a way that I don't know what else can. Like,
mm. Yeah, I
so
think it's epic. Especially, I mean, yeah, even if you're not that way inclined,
yeah,
fascinated by I'm fascinated by space. I'm
yeah,
fascinated by black holes, etc., right?
yeah,
But I think even if you're not that way inclined, you know, you go out there and think, or go out there, look, and just look at the majesty of Allah without thinking about how they've come about.
yeah, yeah,
Um, and even in your garden, if there's trees, if there's grass, the simplest things, I think, um, look into those, look at those things, and they will take you places. They will definitely
yeah.
take you places if you think, well, if you let yourself go. If you let yourself go, I think that's quite important. Let yourself go, and then probably go and watch a documentary on space.
Bro, that's crazy that you said that, because I was gonna say my next thing that I would suggest is, so a lot of us have Netflix and a lot of us have Amazon Prime, and I actually recently got Disney Plus, which is really good.
Is it?
Yeah, I thought it was gonna be terrible, but it's not that bad, and
I
it's
heard
not
it's
it's
free. I heard it's free. I was quite disappointed that it's not.
it's free for 7 days. But it's not it's the cheapest out of all of them. It's 5.99. But what I was going to say about it was that um, on there, on Disney Plus specifically, they've got all the National Geographic documentaries, and they've got some decent,
Oh,
yeah, and they've got some decent space ones as well. And on Netflix, they've got some amazing space ones. So I was going to say that, like, where you might be very dependent on watching movies and stuff, um, for Ramadan, obviously, like, it's not good to look at things that are bad for your soul and things that are illicit, like, nudity, or listen to things that have got swearing or things that have got extreme violence. So
so therefore don't watch Game of Thrones.
definitely do not watch Game of Thrones in Ramadan. Bruv, I remember, like, was it last Ramadan or the Ramadan before that, where it was the last season of Game of Thrones?
Did you do it?
It
Did you
wasn't
watch it?
me. No, no, not me. I'm not gonna actually. No, I'm not gonna. I was gonna
Bait them out.
expose. I was gonna bait. No, I was gonna bait them out, but I won't.
Do a
But
shout out, bro. Do a shout out.
that's not what a shout out is.
Yeah, but
But basically, yeah, an expose. Basically, that person who I am not gonna name now, like, it was Ramadan, and they they watched the last season of Game of Thrones, and then, subhanallah, it turned out that the last season of Game of Thrones ended up being terrible. And then I was like, there you go. That's what you get. If you somehow, subhanallah, like I feel like if you'd waited till after Ramadan, it would have been good. But you watched it in Ramadan and you ruined it.
Mm, mm.
But yeah, so yeah, don't watch that stuff. If you can avoid it, watch stuff that will actually get you thinking about the creation, like space documentaries. You
Mm.
know,
Brian Cox, he's done
yeah,
loads
yeah. The Brian Cox one is amazing. Is it Wonders of
of
the
the universe. I
Wonders
think
of the Universe? Yeah.
I don't know.
Um, or Wonders of the Solar System? No, no, Wonders of the Universe. Or maybe there's two.
There's so many, but I mean, Brian Cox, he's good. Obviously, try to avoid the ones that kind of try to answer these big questions. Oh, about God and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Um,
there are some that I get a little bit on the atheist agenda, but I think his ones are actually like I remember when I saw his one,
they're
I
quite neutral.
actually they're very neutral, but they're actually quite spiritual in
Yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
language he uses. It's impossible not to draw parallels between. And the other thing
It's
is,
his
look,
voice as well.
his voice is so nice, the wonders of the universe. Actually, no, that's not how he talks, but
It
yeah,
does.
he's got like that very soft Manchester accent as well.
Uh,
But but there's some stuff he says in it that like look, we know as Muslims who are not like who use our minds as much as we use our hearts.
mm,
We know that all the things that the Prophet ﷺ said, all the things that are in the Quran, there's nothing wrong in them. There's nothing false in them.
mm,
Why? Because time and time again, science has proved a lot of these things to be correct, and some things science says, um, like it's not anything that Islam says otherwise,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so, when Brian Cox was saying all these things about like the scale of the universe, it just like there's one hadith of the Prophet ﷺ when he talks about the first heaven in relation to the second heaven, and the second heaven in relation to the third heaven, and he talks about how it's like a ring in a desert, and then the next one is like a ring in a desert in comparison to the previous one. And there was a bit in Brian Cox's documentary where Brian Cox was talking about the Earth, and then the Earth being in the solar system, and then the solar system being
Mm.
in the galaxy, and then the galaxy being in a galaxy cluster, and then the galaxy cluster being in the observable universe. And it's subhanallah, it's so similar to the way that the Prophet ﷺ described it,
Do you
and
know
this
what
is,
I'm going? Do you know what I'm going to do after this podcast, bruv?
are you gonna watch it? I think I feel like watching it as well. Um,
It's yeah, it's profound. I got a telescope. Did I tell you about my telescope?
oh, that's
Yeah,
sick.
I was given a telescope. Um,
A good one.
it is a good one. Like I can see the moon,
Oh, sick.
and I can see the craters of the moon, and it's
Would I,
just
if we went out on an evening in Ramadan and we took your telescope and you used it, like put your eye to it and then I put my eye to it, could I catch
cor-
COVID-19?
we'll just have to wipe it down.
Let's do it, bro.
It's so sick. We
Yeah,
have
sorry,
to do.
God, you were saying.
Um, is yeah. So when you look at the moon and then you realize what is out there, um, and then there's something that makes you feel alive. There's
Yeah,
something that makes you feel alive, and for me, when I feel those moments, I feel like the majority of the rest of the time I've been dead. I don't know if
mm.
that makes sense, but
I
I've
think
just
I know
been,
what you mean. It's like a symptom of living in modern society, isn't it?
yeah, very distracted and
And
numb.
disconnected from like the wider universe.
Yeah. I mean, think about it, right? Think about a lot of these religions. They developed in a time where probably they didn't have lights. They didn't have the technology that we had, right?
Yeah,
These people went out and they saw the real sky.
yeah,
And when you see the real sky, or I haven't seen the real sky. I've never seen the real sky, by the way, with my naked eye. I know
yeah.
you have. I haven't.
Oh, are
But
you talking about without light pollution and stuff?
yep, 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 yep.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, there are some places in England, even we're quite lucky. If we go to certain parts of like Tylehurst and the outskirts, like where Bablu lives,
Yeah.
if you go some, you can see a lot of the sky. It's not
Yeah.
the same, but you can see a lot of the sky.
But imagine seeing the galaxy, bruv.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. That's something else.
You know, we are missing out. But imagine the little amount of sky that we see,
Yeah.
and it brings about these types of feelings. Imagine the types of feelings that these desert dwellers were getting, bruv.
100%. I think the beauty of our deen is that so much of it tries to keep us in sync with the mechanisms and the clockwork of the universe and the solar system. And like for example, the months are dictated by the lunar cycle, and you're encouraged to go and to look for is it the hilal? It's called the
Mm,
hilal, right? The
mm,
new
mm,
moon.
mm.
So that's one thing, right? The month of Ramadan doesn't start until we actually go and do a little bit of astronomy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's quite cool, I think.
That is
And
quite cool.
yeah, and then if you look at like the salars are dictated by the position of the Earth's rotation in relation to the sun.
Mm, mm.
So like all these things are, I mean, there's like clues like, hey, wake up. We're supposed to be a bit more connected with what's happening in the
Yeah,
universe,
yeah,
but we're I mean, it's nothing bad to like rely on a watch and stuff, but
yeah.
it's something else. Like, yeah, I 100% agree with that point. I think that really can bring about a sense of like magic. I
Mm.
use that word really, really loosely, but
I think connection.
connection, yeah, connection
Because
with the earth.
we ultimately we are living in a box, in a bubble, bruv. You know, the other day, someone said um, that. Wait, actually, not the other day. Sorry, it was. I've been saying this to you that for a few months actually is when we're walking down the street and we see a little bit of. Actually, Norman Ali Khan says this. Numan
Yes,
Ali
about the
Khan says this
grass.
about the grass.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
It cracks through the pavement, and we like, oh, that's unnatural. Or we look at that as if it shouldn't be there,
yeah,
but that should be there.
yeah,
The pavement shouldn't be there,
yeah.
and this is how deluded we've become because we live in this boxed and sheltered, unnatural world, um, which is grey and bleak and full of walls, and there's no escape. There's a lot of us. We feel like we are trapped, claustrophobic
I'm looking
within
at your
this.
room, bro.
Oh, right. I think you know what? It's this loneliness.
This picture, this picture is actually, this should be the thumbnail of like when you're talking about like humans being trapped in
I think
the
it's
box.
this. I think this has kind of, but it's weird because this lockdown.
Yeah,
I like it. Obviously, they're not the part that there's a killing virus around,
yeah,
but the fact that you don't feel as claustrophobic as well. I don't feel as claustrophobic as I would feel before. The roads are empty. There's not many people around. Um, I'm not saying people are bad things, but for some reason it's kind of taken away
it's like
the
it's
instrument.
calmed civilization down a bit. Like, calm down.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And there's less of the instruments of modern civilizations,
yeah, yeah.
such as cars and,
Aeroplanes.
yeah, yeah, all that stuff. And it feels like, those movies where, well, the things that we're hearing, right? That animals are venturing in to the cities and the dolphins have come into the canals of Venice.
Yeah, yeah,
All this stuff it just feels like wow, the wild is taking back what we've taken away from it.
yeah.
um yeah, it's nice. And then when you look at some of these developing countries where they are transitioning from wilderness to modernity, you see both of them together and you realize, so I've been watching this documentary about Africa, and you see, and even when you go to Bangladesh you see this clash, and you realize that both of these things can't go together. They don't go together.
Yeah,
Either you have to have either wilderness and mud, roads and stuff like that, or you need to just pave everything,
yeah.
or you need to come up with something really ingenious to have both of them coexisting.
When I went to Peru, one of the
Mm,
things I was just blown away by is, the architecture of the Incan people,
yeah,
and the way that their society built their, you could say, technology and their living, like their living quarters and their farms and their like their irrigation and everything, it
mm,
was all in keeping with the sort of the look and the feel and the sort of guiding lines
mm,
of the nature around it. So, for
mm,
example, if
mm,
you looked at their farms, you
mm,
know how, like, for example, if you looked at a bird's eye view of farms in the UK, they're all square fields
mm,
that are
mm,
like boxed off with hedgerows to block things from coming in and out.
mm,
Um, the farms that were in Peru in this area of Machu Picchu, um, so for example, like if a river like meandered a certain way,
mm, mm.
like making S's and shapes, the way their farms would be is like they'd be shaped the
Oh wow.
same way. So if you
Yeah, yeah,
looked at it, you wouldn't even realize it's a farm. You think that's like a naturally occurring
yeah, yeah.
phenomenon, but it's not. They made their farms like that. And
Mm,
in the
mm,
same way with their stairs and the thing that was incredible is, you know, the irrigation systems that they had to get water from certain areas and then feed it into their crops and their toilets and other
mm.
things. Even to this day, those water systems are still working. You know, like for example, if you had a house from the Victorian era
Yeah,
and
yeah,
those
yeah.
those pipes would just eventually it just like you said, nature would just reclaim it. But there, somehow they used their ingenuity and their knowledge of nature to
Mm,
create these waterways and these pathways that were so in keeping with the natural flow of things that even
mm,
to this day they're still going strong. And
mm,
you would
mm,
think, oh, that must just be a naturally occurring water flow because
mm, mm,
no one's touched it.
mm,
And I think like if there's anything that can be learned from that is where you see, you know how you say about Numan Khan and like the grass coming up through the pavement is where you see nature. Um, us as Muslims, we should work to try and complement it and work with it as
mm.
opposed to like fight it. Like you're right, in Bangladesh, man, it's terrible. You can like if you leave a house in Bangladesh for like even a few months and you go back to it, you can
Snakes and
see,
everything. Yeah.
yeah, like nature's really like fighting to just reclaim
Take
it.
it. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so just to just because we're getting on to an hour now, I had two more tips,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and I'll make them quick. This one, um, it was for a lot of people, this one's actually not a big deal and it's not new because people probably do it anyway. But it was for us because we live near the masjid, and so we never do Jamaat at home. We just go to the masjid. Um, but we're really missing it, and especially my dad, who literally lives in the masjid pretty much. So we started doing Jamaat at home, where he does the adhan, and then we all pray together. The women, the men, everyone, we all pray in the house, and that
Mm,
has actually really alleviated the disconnect from the masjid.
mm-hmm,
So that's one
mm-hmm,
thing. Is if it, I know in your case it might be difficult because you're living by yourself, but if it's possible and you're living with other people, which most people are, then do Jamaat at home. That's one very small quick tip. Maybe you can't do the full juz of the Quran in Taraweeh in the evenings, but you can do short surahs and get through it like that, and you still have that feeling. Oh yeah, Taraweeh, which is like one of the awesome things about Ramadan is doing Taraweeh in the evenings.
mm,
And then the final thing I was going to say is that many people, because they can't go Taraweeh and they can't go to the masjid and they can't do all these other things, feel like they're going to be falling short of good deeds,
mm,
falling short of like the things that they could be doing. So I was going to say that actually there's so many things in our deen that count as good deeds, and you
mm,
don't have to look at good deeds as only like specific, strict acts of worship like praying and dhikr and fasting. It's, like helping someone do the dishes in the house. If you make the intention that I'm doing this for the sake of Allah and I'm doing this to alleviate someone's burden, then you get reward for it. Keeping spirits up in a house, and also a huge one, which we can still do if it's within our means, is to give charity and give your zakat. And I think one thing I would highly recommend everyone to do is give towards causes that are helping people who are afflicted with this particular situation. Like COVID-19. I know you started a page to help the NHS fundraise for like equipment and stuff. So that's a wicked place to donate to, I think. And then there's people overseas who are struggling with
mm,
COVID-19 as well.
mm. Definitely.
So yeah, bro, that's me. If people who are listening have got tips, then comment and send us messages, and we'll try and share it in the next one that we do. But did you want to say anything else?
I think one more, and it just kind of transitions from connecting with God and nature and stuff like that, is I think it's a good time to actually, when we are fasting, where our food is coming from, if what we are eating
Yeah,
is completely clean and halal. I think it's a very important time, especially with what is going on around us, and all these positive things that are coming around with pollution and all this stuff. I think it's very important that we actually think about the environment that we're living in and the negative impact that we could have on it, or the negative impact that we did have on it, and we are having on it, because we are definitely having negative impact on it, and has a lot of people. Well, if I'm just one person. China has to make if China doesn't do anything in America, there's no point. I think forget about that. I think at least by doing that, you're trying to change the environment around you, whether
yeah.
it changes or not.
That was a
You
dig
have
at
that
Pablo,
mindset.
isn't it?
Yeah, it was a dig at that bloke. It's
No, but
because
it's
that is what he
true.
says. It's
It's
true. That
no,
that
but
is
it's
what he
true.
says.
You're right, because like there's an amazing tradition in the Deen of, even if you're the last person just before the world's about to end, then
Yeah,
still plant,
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
plant a seed. That's
yeah.
amazing.
And imagine the ripple effect you'll have. You are one person, but for example, the impact that you've had on me. So with the chickens. Yeah, I wanted to go organic, or I wanted to go free range, whatever, but I hadn't gone that step forward. I didn't take that step to find out where I can get it from.
Yeah, yeah,
Whereas so that's two people now. There's two of us now. There was one person, or two of us alone, and there's two people now,
yeah,
and even Bablu is thinking in a way. So
yeah,
although we haven't made massive difference, we are having influence on the loved ones, the people around us,
yeah.
and that will grow exponentially, because your loved ones will have impact on other people, and the ripple effect. You don't
It's
know.
it's 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 crazy that you just used that word exponential, and it just made me realize that how like COVID-19 is spreading in this viral way, that you can actually have like good stuff spreading in a viral way as well.
Yeah. So I think it's very important. As Muslims, it's very important that we
You've become a big softie.
have I.
This whole episode, you've been saying all these frou-frou, soft, really
I
like
think
you're really in touch with it's isolation has made you really
I'm
get
gonna
in touch
become
with your emotional side.
soon. I'll be dance like a ballerina, bro.
Don't do that. Don't do
No,
that.
I think I really think it's important, man. I mean, knowing what's going on, and then watching. There's so many documentaries on the stuff that we consume. It's not good, man. It's just not good for
Yeah.
ourselves, for our bodies, and then the environment around us. We really need to look after that, especially as Muslims, man. We need to take that responsibility of making sure that not only human beings are at peace, and not only human beings aren't being exploited, that animals and trees and etc. aren't exploited. They are still the
Yeah.
creatures of Allah, and we have a duty to protect them. Allah
Yeah.
has made us masters over these things. And being a master over these things doesn't mean that we exploit them. It means that we look after them
Yeah, the phrase is Khalifa on, what was it?
on,
Khalifa
on Earth. Yeah,
on earth, which means like the steward or the kind of caretaker, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. You know
And
what's
we know how
really
to do that.
cool is potentially this, because of COVID-19 and everything that's happening, this Ramadan could actually be a really good opportunity to make a very substantial change,
Yeah, definitely.
like in the world, but also in our own lives, like
Mm.
in every aspect.
I think start off with our own lives, man. Forget the world. I mean, the world will. You make that. If we make that change in our own lives, I'm sure if it's not good for the world, it'll be good for us.
Yeah.
And if we can't change the world, is in Allah's hands. Allah is the master of the whole world. But making those changes in our lives, is good for us, and it will show to Allah, look, I am listening to what you said, mate. So forgive
Amazing.
me. So forgive me.
I mean, I think that's a wicked note to end it. So, if you guys enjoyed that, then share it with your loved ones and make dua for us when you break your fast. And yeah, we'll see you next time.
I'm gonna have my 1 hour rec time now.
All right.
Salam alaikum.
Bye, Islam.